It is that time, everybody. I hope you're excited. I am. This is Jennifer McInnes with Sonoran Desert Institute. We have a really exciting webinar tonight, guys. I'm super pumped to have Brandon on here. I think there's going to be a ton of good information, and I'm particularly interested in tonight's because a bunch of people, these last couple webinars that we've been doing, tons of you guys have had questions on FFLs. So I think we're going to have a really, really good time tonight. Quick couple little housekeeping notes before we get rolling here. For those of you who just joined us within the last couple minutes, I'm going to catch you up a little bit on how this is going to work. This is an audio webinar tonight, meaning that Brandon and I are going to talk. You guys are on mute. There are right now almost 200 of you on the line, so it'd be a little bit of a, a little bit of a cluster to have everybody chime in all at once. So that's going to be my job. I will be your eyes and ears for the evening. And make sure that everybody's answers are getting, everybody's questions rather, are getting answered, at least to the best of my ability. So give me just a teensy bit of patience tonight. There are lots of you on, which I'm super excited about. The way that you're going to be interacting tonight is through the questions section of your GoToWebinar dashboard. So if you do have a question for Brandon, pop on over to that section. Your dashboard's either going to be along the top or along the side of your screen, and you're looking for the part that says questions. Click on it, it'll expand for you, and you can go ahead and type everything in there. I will keep an eye out on everything that goes on over there and do my best to get everything in. As always, we will do just a quick brief thing on what SDI is. We'll do a quick brief thing on who Brandon is and what he does, and then we are going to dive into the content tonight. I know there are going to be a lot of questions. So without any further ado, like I said, my name is Jennifer McInnes. Oh, I almost forgot. Hold on. One more thing, just in case anybody's wondering, because I know a bunch of you are. We will be recording this tonight, so don't worry about that. If you do want to review this at some point in the future, like I said, I'm recording it as we speak. I will be posting it to the SDI YouTube channel within the next day or two, and then we'll post that link over to the SDI Facebook page as well. So keep an eye out, and you'll be able to access that whenever you want. Feel free to, we've got a bunch of good questions pouring in. I'm looking at everybody. Thank you very much. Keep them coming, guys, and I will kind of sift through them and get to them in as timely a fashion as I can. So now, without any further ado, I'm going to fly through this. So I guess the main takeaway for this, you guys, is if you do have more questions on SDI, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight. Feel free to reach out to us. You can hit up admissions. That's admissions@sdi.edu is the easiest way to get in touch with them. Check out the website, sdi.edu, and I'm just going to give you a real quick snapshot here because we have a ton of you guys on the line that have not come from the SDI side of things. So SDI is an online firearms school. We are nationally accredited through the DEAC. All of the coursework that you'll be doing is delivered online, meaning that your tests and quizzes are completed within our online learning space. We call it Moodle. That learn space is where you'll actually access all of your bookwork and all of your, like I said, tests and quizzes, all that good stuff. But we do ship all of your tools and materials right to your door so that you get the hands-on side kind of from the convenience of your home. We offer two big programs here. Those first two, Associate of Science in Firearms Technology degree and Advanced Gunsmithing Certificate. Both of those are approved for use of most TA and VA benefits. So if that's something that interests you, feel free to reach out to admissions. They can walk you through that benefit process and get any questions answered that you might have. We have a non-credit ballistics and reloading certificate as well. And then a couple different standalone course options for you that'll specifically focus on builds. So all those three you see there, advanced armor courses, AR-15, AR-10, 1911. You can take those as standalone courses if you'd like, or you can use your capstone course, which is within those two big ones, the Associate and the Advanced Gunsmithing Certificate. You'll have a capstone course in there that you can select one of those armor courses for. So one of those three will happen, assuming that you select it in those two courses or those two big programs as well. Last thing I want to talk about, if you are a current student, AGF, that's the Advanced Gunsmithing Certificate or the degree program, please check out the field study externship opportunities that we have. They are super cool, you guys. If you go to the home page, there's a green button in the upper corner that says current students. Click there, look for the field study information. We have about 13 locations nationwide. You can do 2 to 4 weeks on-site, hands-on, you're there all day basically, doing an externship, learning how things go for those different partners. They're really, really neat, and we highly recommend them. They are at no additional tuition costs for students, but you are, of course, you do have to figure out housing while you're there for the 2 to 4 weeks and travel. Other than that, though, it's completely, everything is just done, through the school and the partner, really. If you have any questions, you see there, field study at sdi.edu. Otherwise, admissions at sdi.edu is the best way to go. And we're going to move on. So I'm going to let Brandon kind of talk about his background a little bit, because there are a couple different pieces here that I think people are going to find interesting. Brandon, first of all, welcome. And second of all, if you could walk us through a little bit of how you came to be where you are, both with Dakota Silencer and with FFL 123, and maybe even the various organizations that you're a part of. I think that'd be a really good launching point for us for this big old discussion about FFL and all that good stuff.
Perfect.
So welcome,
so can you hear me all right? Can you hear me all right?
I sure can. Thank you.
All right. Perfect. Well, thanks for inviting me. I got your email there that there was a lot of questions in the last webinar, so hopefully we can address some of those and at least give people contact so that they can reach out if they do get other questions. So, my path is probably very different than most, but very similar to each, person kind of comes full circle, different routes. I honestly didn't really grow up in a gun household, if you will, and always enjoyed shooting firearms, but never really grew up, where I know a lot of people grow up in that type of environment, where unfortunately I did not. But my wife is from South Dakota, and I'm originally mostly from the East Coast, and my wife wanted to come back out here to South Dakota, and I decided, well, I should pick up a hobby. Just to, and everyone's pretty popular out here with pheasant hunting and varmint hunting, so I decided to kind of jump into it feet first. And, I started prairie dog hunting, varmint hunting, and I moved here from Florida, and I don't honestly know if I'd ever heard of a prairie dog, so I moved out here. And my father-in-law, like myself, is a pharmacist, and he has a federal farms license in his pharmacy, and he's had it there for, 25, 30 years. And I kind of saw the benefit of him ordering all my supplies for me, my, rifles, my ammo, my scopes, pretty much anything I needed, he was able to order for me. So at a point it got to where it's like, hey, I should probably try to get this myself and, keep him from having to drive it up to me an hour north. So that's when I kind of went down the path of getting a federal farms license from my house. And I found that, it maybe wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. And so after I kind of fought through getting a federal farms license for my house, then I decided that the resources I had used and the people I had talked to, I found that a lot of the information out there was totally wrong. And a lot of the information even that I paid for was wrong. So I kind of felt like there was an opportunity in the marketplace to create kind of become a subject matter expert to help other people overcome some of the obstacles I had had. It seemed easy to me. I'm in South Dakota. It's supposedly a conservative state. They should be firearms friendly. This should be easy. And unfortunately, it wasn't. But once I got the federal farms license, then I decided that it would be kind of cool to have a Class 3 license. My wife has several male siblings. They're all dentists here in town, and her father, they're all big into guns. So I convinced her that I should get a license so I could get silencers for just us. I mean, it made sense to get them for ourselves. So that was the goal, really, was for me just to get a few silencers for myself, help out a few friends get them, and then, now we got 8 locations in 7 states. I think we did $24 million in sales just last year. So it's kind of exploded. It's been fun. But sort of to tie both of these together, I find that the Class 3 is, it's a little bit more paperwork, obviously, than a regular a basic FFL. There's paperwork, obviously, but the Class 3, there's more paperwork. And understanding all the Class 3 rules was kind of the challenge for me when I was doing Dakota Silencer. And then, honestly, there was parallel there with getting your federal farms license, because there's a fair amount of steps that you want to follow sequentially in the right order. And, as I continued to open more locations, I learned things. I had different obstacles in each state, it seemed like. A lot of these states I'm in are in different regions. Nebraska's in Kansas City district, and I'm in South Dakota. I'm in the St. Paul district. And so I was able to kind of interact with ATF all over, and I thought, wow, it'd be great to kind of pull a source together to bring all this together. So that full circle, that's where I'm at with, Dakota Silencer, FFL123.com. I'd say I spend, probably 95% of my day working on Dakota Silencer, but in between phone calls and, managing staff and working gun shows, I'm answering emails kind of nonstop on FFL123.com. I feel like it keeps me motivated because people are asking the same questions about obstacles that they ran into. And for me, it's easy to see them not as an obstacle because I was able to overcome them. So a lot of times I see my job as sort of mentoring or coaching people through the process to see success is coming on the other side. I'm president of Dakota Territory, which is on here. Basically, we do 15 gun shows in North and South Dakota. Main reason I jumped on that is because a lot of my exposure comes through being at gun shows. So I felt like if I could get involved in that leadership, that it would help my business, which it has. And then as you get deeper into a particular industry, you find things you want to change. A lot of things I want to change in state law in South Dakota, and the only way I could really change that was, get some industry leaders together, create a group of lobbyists, start, collecting money, hiring attorneys, and then influencing the state legislators. So that's kind of all this goes back to helping, Dakota Silencer, but also brings additional insight that helps me with FFL 123. So I probably went too long there, but is that kind of what you were looking for, Jennifer?
That's perfect, actually. I think that's great. And actually something that you touched on is, I think, a really good segue into the FFL discussion that we're going to have tonight. You talked about a little bit of the difference in paperwork between about the Class 3 FFL.
Right.
And we've had a lot of guys kind of ask, what are the main differences between the classes of FFL? Can you bullet point some of that for us?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of two separate things. So there's the most common, obviously, is a Type 1 federal firearms license, and a Type 1 is your basic dealer. So most people would say, Type 1 is probably best for them. There's also a Type 2, which involves pawn. Unless you're actually opening a pawn shop, we don't typically recommend that. You open yourself up for a lot more scrutiny with ATF because that's a lot of the, straw purchases or, criminal purchases are made through pawn shops, unfortunately. So, I've seen gun shops that open up just as they get an O2 even though they're just a dealer because they're doing some consignment, and then they end up opening themselves up for a lot of inspections. The other one we get a lot of questions about is the Type 07. And the Type 07 is manufacturing, and honestly, for a lot of reasons, to me, that's probably the best license to have because it allows you to manufacture and it allows you to deal in firearms. I mean, it opens you up to some other different areas of, potential scrutiny with the government, but it's cheaper to apply for initially, which is always a positive, and it just allows you the flexibility to manufacture and to also deal in firearms. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. Of all of our licenses, we don't use our manufacturing as much, but I'm sitting here on my desk looking at a 300 Blackout that I built today that's got a 10.5-inch barrel, so it's a short barrel rifle. So we'll have to use our 07 manufacturing license tied with our Class 2 license to register this as a short barrel rifle. But those are the most common FFL types, or Type 1, Type 2, and then Type 7. Some people ask about a 6 to make ammo. I would still recommend getting a 7 because with a 7 you can manufacture ammo as well. The other question you ask is sort of classes. So after you get your federal firearms license, you can upgrade it to what a lot of people call Class 3, which actually is sort of slang. It's truly an SOT, a special occupational tax. So most of you that live in NFA-friendly states probably realize that, every time a customer purchases a short barrel rifle or a silencer or even a machine gun, if they're legal in your state, the customer has to pay a $200 fee for the ATF to do that transfer. Well, as a dealer, that special occupational tax keeps you sheltered from having to pay any taxes when they're transferred to you directly. So a Class 2 is for manufacturing firearms, so you have to have an 07, and then you upgrade it to a Class 2. And then to have a Class 3, you're just typically basically a Type 1 FFL, and you upgrade that to a Class 3 SOT, which allows you to deal in mostly silencers and short barrel rifles. So those are the main, types and classes of licenses that you can get from typically from your home or from a storefront.
It looks like there's a little bit of confusion on the difference between a class and a type. Is that
Yes.
just, yeah, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so type is just type is the type 1, 2, 3, there's different types of federal farms licenses. So think of it as you can't get a class until you get a type. So first you have to get a type 1, and then once you get an FFL, you can apply for a class 3 on top of that. So just remember that the type FFL is the first step, and then the class FFL is the next step. But there's only really two classes. There's a class 2 and a class 3, and you can't get that unless you first have a federal farms license. So think of the types first, then the classes second.
Like a driver's license, kind of.
Yeah, correct. I sometimes say it's an upgrade. Basically, you're paying a premium. I mean, I like that space just because that's my niche. I feel like that typically the margins are better, but there's a whole lot more headache as far as paperwork. So it's got its trade-offs, but that's the niche we live in is the class 3 and class 2.
Okay. And a couple people have asked, so do you get them, or can you get them at the same time? Can you apply, or do you have to be established?
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that's a good question. I know a lot of people say, well, how long do I have to have my federal farms license before I can apply for my class 3? And here's the interesting thing. So when you apply for a federal farms license, the day they cash your check, they issue you a federal farms license number. Now, that doesn't mean it's active, but they issue you one, and it routes through the ATF system as an FFL number. So technically, you could apply for them at the same time. It's just the Class 3 application asks for your FFL number. So it could be difficult. I mean, you could say applied for or something like that. But the real insight here is that this license, the Class 2 and Class 3 license, it renews and expires July 1st of every year. So, I get a big bill in the mail, in June for all of my locations to have to pay that for every location. So most people, it's advantageous to get your FFL, sort of catch your breath, feel confident in what you're doing, and then jump into looking at the Class 3 or Class 2. Just realize, like I got mine in January, but my gun shows start in January, February, March. Those are my busiest months. So I went ahead and paid for my Class 3 license in January, even though I had to renew it again in end of June. So just keep that in the back of your mind that the price to get your Class 3 is going to be every year at the 1st of July. I mean, you can apply for it in January and say you want it to be active end of June of that same year if you wanted. But it's probably advantageous to get your FFL first. I mean, there's some advantages when you meet with the ATF to tell them you're planning on getting a Class 3 if that's something you're interested in, and they can go over that information when they sit down and meet with you, which is beneficial. I mean, I find the meeting with ATF to be very helpful. You kind of get their insights on what they're looking for, what they want, what they think is important, and it creates a good open dialogue.
Okay, great. So I've got a couple follow-up questions. Because of who SDI is, there are going to be a lot of guys on the line tonight and ladies on the line tonight who are interested in becoming gunsmiths, running gunsmithing type businesses out of their homes or renting space and that type of thing. So I've had a couple questions on do you need a Type 07 to sell ammo? Do you need a Type 07 to be a home-based gunsmith? Do you need a Type 07 to Cerakote? Those are kind of the three that I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, good questions. So typically in most states, honestly, you don't have to have a federal firearms license to buy ammo. Even the ammo distributors I use, they don't require an FFL. I mean, I always say that, an FFL brings credibility to the table, so I don't think it hurts you to have one if you're trying to do ammo. So it's something to look at, but just, some people start selling ammo or ordering ammo before they actually get their federal firearms license because you don't have to have an FFL to sell that. I mean, like some states are weird. Like in New York, you have to have an FFL just to sell mace in a pharmacy. So to the question about gunsmithing, yeah, exactly, yeah. So, it's sort of a tough question on the 07. So some of this is going to be my opinion. The 07 gets a little sticky because the federal law is written very vague. And what they don't want is they want you as an '07 making some kind of weapon that our enemies, I hate to even pick a country, but let's just say, Iran, they don't want you making some kind of technology that could leak out or be sent to a foreign country. So the federal government tries to regulate some people with an '07. They call it ITAR. You hear people talk about it. That's more if you're an exporter, but also the way the law is so vague, they potentially could enforce that for other things. Like during the Obama administration, they came out and said if you thread barrels, you need to be registered with ITAR, which is an expensive process. We have an '07. You can assemble with an '07. So if you're buying parts from somewhere else and you're assembling them, and then you can have an '07, and you don't have to register with the feds for assembly if you're buying the parts somewhere else. Or if someone brings in a lower receiver to you and brings all the parts to you, that is truly gunsmithing. That's not manufacturing if the customer brings the parts to you and they own them. I mean, the hope is, I know NSSF, the folks that do the SHOT Show and sort of the industry trade group, they're working to, make changes at the federal level to make sure the federal government's not overreaching their oversight there, where just because you're an '07 and you're gunsmithing, that you would need to fall under different categories that would require registration. I mean, I could just speak from my own personal experience and other people I've talked to, but we mostly just assemble parts to manufacture. We don't do anything too crazy. And we have been asked to register with ITAR in the past, and I've emailed them back or mailed them and said, we're not exporting or truly manufacturing, so we're not going to be registering, and I never heard anything else out of it. But you don't need an '07 to do Cerakoting. I think that was most of the question around the '07. And it's something that, too, if you are a member of FFL123.com, honestly, the best information is in the forums. Most of the information in FFL123.com, either fortunately or unfortunately, my attorneys all reviewed, and sometimes things get filtered out. But the good thing about the members area in FFL123.com is that people will post their personal experiences or what they've seen or what they've done underneath particular situations, and I find that's very helpful for other members, and it's sort of it's a searchable area that you can see if you're a customer. So there's a lot of good information in there on ITAR and '07 versus '01, and just realize that if you get an '01 and you want to be a dealer, if you want to become an '07 later, you have to reapply. Not that that's the end of the world, but it's important to sort of step back and think about that decision prior to applying.
I think that's kind of a sticking point that I'm seeing here is this: what do we get an '01 or an '07 based on what they're going to be doing? So if they're going to be assembling ARs, is that gunsmithing or is that manufacturing?
Good question. I mean, assembling ARs is an '07, and that doesn't require any type of additional registration with the Fed. So, the problem is sometimes when you meet with ATF, they'll tell you that, anytime you have an '07, you're going to have to register with additional departments. But, somebody, if you're a customer and you email me, I can send you some letters where my customers have asked the ITAR people about clarification on who registers and who doesn't. And it's very clear based on their opinions that if you aren't truly manufacturing, you're buying parts from someone else who's already, manufactured, then you're not going to be having to register with them. But yes, you do need an '07 manufacturer's license just to assemble, which I know seems weird, but I think it's probably dealing with the tax issues because they do want to collect tax on things that are manufactured. So it's easier for them if it's unknown to push you towards manufacturing just so that they can monitor it from a tax perspective.
Okay. And can you be a dealer and a gunsmith with an '07?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's really the benefit of the '07 is that you could be a dealer and a manufacturer. So my main license is an '07. So all of I think we did like 10,000 silencers last year. Every one of them went through my '07 license. So yes, we use our '07 almost exclusively for everything.
Okay, great. And then would an '07 cover building, short barrel rifles as a gunsmith, that type of thing?
Yeah, good question. So you still need that upgrade, that thing we were talking about, the special occupational tax, the Class 2 license. So if you have an FFL '07 and then you get a special occupational tax on top of that, you're considered a Class 2 dealer, Class 2 manufacturer, and you can make short barrel rifles and you don't have to pay the $200 tax. So that's what we have is the '07 SOT. Not to get too down into details, but there's other advantages to having a manufacturer's license too. So I had a friend that was retiring, and he had some antique machine guns, and he could transfer them to me because I have an '07 without getting any kind of letters from law enforcement. Whereas if I'd been an '01, I could not have gotten those machine guns at his retirement. And there were a lot of, antique type machine guns. So there's a lot of advantages to having an '07 that it just gives you an additional flexibility.
Okay, great. And I'm going to chime in here in case there's anybody listening that this might help. If you're on the fence on, short barrel rifles, anything like that, we did a webinar, gosh, I want to say maybe 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, with a guy named Dan O'Kelly. He runs an operation called gunlearn.com, and he went over in detail firearms classification. So if you are interested in that at all as you're making these FFL decisions and things like that, that is on the SDI YouTube channel there, and we have a little playlist called, I think, School of Firearms Technology webinars, something like that. Look for the Dan O'Kelly one. Like I said, I think it was probably 6 months ago, but that might help with this conversation and thought process as well, in case anybody wants that. A couple guys are asking, oh shoot, I just lost it here. What does, we keep talking about that. What does manufacturing entail? Somebody asked something about actually retailing suppressors. Like, now if you have the '07, do you still have the tax stamp on silencers?
Yeah, so if you have an '07, you still have to get that SOT, that additional upgrade, to be able to sell silencers without having to pay that $200 tax.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'm going to sift through a couple of these. There have been a couple that are in the same realm. Although, there are a couple questions here about the actual application, just topical ones about the applying. One guy says he got his application in the mail. There are 4 copies. Does he have to fill each one out individually?
Yeah, good question. So, on our website, we have links to the actual ATF PDFs, the, Adobe PDFs. If you edit the ATF FFL application through actual Adobe, as you type your information in the first page, it'll sort of transcribe that same data through all pages. So, if you're trying to enter data through a PDF through your browser, that's not going to work. But if you actually open up an Adobe program and type in the application, then it'll put it all the way through, so you don't have to rewrite it each time.
Cool.
But the ATF does want one copy. In the past, they've wanted 2, but now they just want 1. 1 copy goes to your local sheriff, just kind of giving them an FYI that you're applying. I have to send that to them every time I renew, every 3 years as well. And then also, you just hold on to a copy yourself, so that when they come to meet with you, you kind of look organized, that you have the same thing in front of you that they brought with them.
Okay, great. Robert wants to know, he already applied for a Type 1. Can he change that to a Type 7 at the interview, or is it a totally
Yes.
process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sometimes the application process gets squirrely if you try to put more than one on there. I've actually had them ask me to resubmit and just put 1 on there at a time, because I've been known to apply for several at one time. But yeah, so totally, when they come in to meet with you, you can switch it, and typically they'll bill you, or you can even write them a check. And if you use a credit card on the application, they can rebill that. So that's not a problem at all. I mean, to me, I think 7's the best way to go. A lot of online blogs will scare you not to get the 7, but I've not ever had any problems with the 7, and I just feel like it. So for another example, and I mean, I know a lot of people that are just getting into it, it's hard for them to conceptualize this, but if you have an '07, you can reach out to the ATF and you can say, hey, I want this guy in Virginia to make lower receivers for me and put my name on them. So I could connect with a guy in Virginia, have Dakota Silencer put on all these receivers, and ATF will give a variance to that guy in Virginia where he can put my logo and my name and my information on there. So when I'm selling them online, it looks like I made them when actually I had someone else make them. And you're able to do that if you have an '07. So the '07 just creates so many more opportunities because you never know, where your business is going to go. I always say when I first started, my goal was to sell expensive hunting rifles because I liked Cooper rifles. And, as soon as I got my FFL and called them, they said, no, we're not selling to you. So, I mean, my whole world's like, okay, what do I do now?
Oh no. Oh no. Any idea what the cost is? Ballpark?
For an oh
For
07?
an oh 07? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's $150 to apply, and that covers you for 3 years.
And at the end of that 3 years, actually, this is one of the first questions we had. The renewal process, at that 3 year mark, do you have to go through the whole thing all over again, or is it a quick kind of renewal thing?
Yeah, it's a quick renewal. I mean, they ask you a couple pointed questions. They want to know, how many transfers you did, as far as like transfers in, transfers out. They just want to make sure that, you're not just stockpiling stuff for yourself.
Of
I don't
course.
know that I don't know that they use that number to do anything with because I've had some licenses I never used for 3 years. I just had them in case I needed them later. So they do run another background check on you as an individual. So you're giving them your kind of permission to do a background check on you and confirming you haven't, committed any felonies in the last 3 years. But no, the review process, the renewal process is kind of one form and it's already pre-typed. I mean, my honest feedback on that is send that thing in the day you get it, because if you don't send that in on time, or if you thought you sent it in on time and it gets there late, you got to start over. So I have a lot of people say, "Man, I can't believe I let it sit on my desk and it's probably a little late sending it in, and they canceled my entire license. I had to start over."
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's no good. Better safe than sorry.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Carl asks, if I'm working in 2 states, do I need an FFL in both? Can you walk him through a little bit of those details?
Yeah, so an FFL is site specific. So each location that I have an FFL, it's address specific to the location where the theory is that they want the records to be there. They want whatever activities you're doing, whether it be gunsmithing or selling, to occur at that specific address. So, I mean, my own learning was I started doing gun shows in South Dakota, and as I started working shows in the northern part of the state, I had people coming down from North Dakota wanting to buy from me, and that scenario kind of followed me throughout the whole geography. So now that's why I have a license in every state that touches the state I live in. So you do have to have a physical presence. Could be a buddy's house. I mean, I know people here have, 8 locations. They think that, it's some big, huge store. But in some cases, I've just found other people that own businesses. They have an interest in firearms like I do, and I pay them with silencers. So I say, all right, how much do I owe you this year? And all right, how many silencers is that I need to have transferred to you for you to use? Because that's how I'm going to pay you. So you do have to have a location, and sometimes it is easier just to find a friend or someone you trust and set up your license there.
Sure. I have a couple questions here that have chimed in on different transfer type of questions. So how hard is it to change the physical address on your FFL? We'll start there.
Yeah, good question. So the ATF asks for 30 days. They want you to submit it's like an amended federal firearms license. So they want you to submit that to them 30 days before you move. So I've done that a lot. So like, say for instance, I got a call one day that said, hey, Minnesota just legalized silencers. And I had an extra federal firearms license in South Dakota waiting for that to happen. And then once I secured a location for my business in Minnesota, I just did an address change with the ATF. My honest, personal experience is it's not always that easy. You don't just send it in and it comes back changed. I mean, I know that some parts of the country have that luxury, but unfortunately, I don't think I have. None of mine have been easy. But as soon as I submit it, I start calling up there, going, "All right, you got it. When are you gonna process it? What do you need from me? What's taking so long? Why do I not already have it?" So, but there's other guys I talk to that say, "Hey, I sent it in, and 10 days later it came back updated." And I don't want to name the lady I have in West Virginia, but she's just chronically dysfunctional. So it seems like that she comes up with a million excuses as to why she hasn't done it yet. And she's a nice lady, but I feel like I have to ride her to get it done. But
Sure.
but again, I mean, that's another cool thing about the whole. Once you understand the FFL process, I knew that if I had 2 extra licenses in South Dakota, that if silencers became legal in Iowa and Minnesota, I could just do an address change on those 2 licenses and boom, now I'm in, 2 more states with literally very little turnaround. I mean, I've been known to change an FFL within, a couple days and have it active in the new location, and I'm able to start selling there within a few days because I had already, thought through that this could happen, so let's have an extra license available if need be.
Along those same lines, a couple people have asked about changing what the difficulty level is, I guess, of changing from a home-based to a storefront FFL. Is it the same? Is it just an address change, or do you go through a whole different process?
Yeah. I mean, that's all it is an address change. Yeah, I mean, they ask you to confirm on the amended application that where you're going doesn't have any, local laws that would prohibit you from doing it. So you have to feel comfortable signing that and do your due diligence there. I know when I first switched to a Minnesota location, I actually was switching to a friend's house who already had an FFL. He was that machine gun guy who was retiring that I bought a lot of machine guns from, but I called their city and asked them, and they started telling me that it was zoned, some kind of water protection area, and there's no way I could put an FFL there. And I mean, so you do have to. Of course, I was able to work through all that, but just realize that just sort of handle all your issues up front. And that's one good thing about our guide is it kind of gives you sort of step by step. Here's sort of the bases I need to cover. Here's the boxes I need to check off before I submit this, so I know I'm going to get approved before I even submit it. But no, it's not hard to switch. If anything, it's probably easier to switch from a home to a store. Guys will email me every day and say, well, I'm looking at buying this, or I'm looking at building this, and I'm doing this, and, I don't know when to apply. And I always say, wow, I would just do it from your house and then just do an address change. That's what I did. I got to the point where the reality became I can't hire an employee to come to my house and work, and I am too busy with what then was a full-time day job and also, managing Dakota Silencer. So I was forced from a commercial standpoint to have to I moved to an office, just like an office building that, we still own. And I just did an address change there. And I still keep the license there. And I'm renting it out to someone else who's not firearms related. So it's not difficult to change addresses. If anything, it's probably easier to go from a home to somewhere else.
Okay, good. A couple people have asked if having an FFL at a home location or even at a friend's location, if that may potentially open people up to kind of unannounced ATF inspections and other types of complications. Can you speak to that point at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that honestly, for me, when I first started, the biggest challenge was just the shipments, because a lot of the people who are shipping guns, do you want an adult signature? And my wife and I always have had day jobs, so it's difficult to have an adult there at your house to sign for stuff. It's funny because some people throw that out as, well, I'll never get an FFL because someone has to be home to sign for it, and I'm never home, so I'm not going to get one. And I always say, well, if there's a will, there's a way. I mean, I used to tip my UPS guy, and it's amazing how, things started getting dropped off at my work, or, my hood popped open and he was putting them in there, or, they were putting them in a stack at the UPS location. I'd come on Friday night and pick up the whole week's worth. So I think that you do have to think through sometimes logistics of the mailing part, but the opening up, ATF, federal law says ATF can only show up to your license location once every 12 months. So once they interview you and meet with you to give you an FFL, they can't come back for 12 months. And traditionally they focus on people that have high volume of firearms that are handgun related. So when you're doing background checks and you're checking that box for handguns, that's what opens you up, because really at the end of the day, their goal is to protect the the people in your community and other communities, and they're looking at crimes, and they're looking at straw purchases, they're looking at handguns, they're looking at multiple handgun purchases. Most of you probably know if you buy more than one handgun in a 5-day period, there's a lot of additional paperwork you have to do for that customer. So if you're a dealer that submits a lot of those to the ATF, those are the type of things that would open you up to additional sort of scrutiny. But as long as you have your books in order and your paperwork's organized, and we go through a lot of that in our guides, how to stay organized, because I'm convinced if you're organized, you're confident, and if they do show up at the front door, you're not too worried about it. As far as, I can't think of anything else that would open you up to. I know some people get worried about that. Just realize that if you have your license somewhere else, at the end of the day, you are still kind of on the hook. I mean, if the license is in your name or it's in your business name and you have other people working on it, you just have to make sure you do your due diligence. I've sent employees to go check on my other locations to make sure their paperwork's in order, and I've found not huge errors, but enough errors that, it's concerning. Little things, maybe things aren't in order or things weren't signed, exact location or little things like that. So I think you just need to be worried more from a due diligence. One thing about the ATF that I think most people don't realize at all, honestly, I didn't realize this until I sat down with them. There's no national trace for serial numbers. So when a customer walks into my office or my store here and they buy a gun, they pick up a gun from me, we don't really do a whole lot of guns. We mostly do silencers, but we do a lot of transfers of online stuff. So when I reach out to the FBI to do a background check on that customer sitting here, I don't give the FBI/ATF the serial number. They just know what type of gun it was. So there's really no serial number traces. There's no big database in the sky of serial numbers. There's really, the take home here is the only way the ATF and FBI can do background checks and traces is based on the books that the FFL keeps. So the ATF wants to make sure you keep good books, because if a gun is used in a crime, they take that serial number to the manufacturer, then they ask the manufacturer which wholesaler it went to, and then they ask the wholesaler which dealer it went to, and then they call me and I have to look in my books and see who I actually transferred it to. So there is a real partnership between ATF and the FFL that people don't realize. Some people think it's an adversarial relationship. Really, I find it to be a very open relationship, because if my books aren't good, there's no way they can trace criminals. So they have to really work with us to make sure that we keep good records and have good communication with them so they can check our books if they need to. So that's one thing to think about, just as far as, people get concerned. Always keep that in the back of your mind, that they're not really trying to catch you to do something wrong. They're just making sure you do it right in case they need that information, they'll have access to it.
Those books, do those need to be, like, let's say if they're using a friend's address, do the books need to be kept at that location, or is that something that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All
Yep.
the information has to be kept there. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, our guides cover how to store stuff off site. So, I mean, you can not paperwork, but firearms. So, you can set up an FFL in another location. There's a way to store firearms off site, and then you could just bring them to that site to do the transfer, because all transfers have to occur at the licensed location or at a gun show in the state where your license is held.
Okay, sounds good. Do you know if having a concealed carry permit assists with the FFL process at all?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. They're really totally not related at all. Concealed carry is issued at a state level, and a federal firearms license obviously is at the federal level. The only similarities I can see is that, most cases to get a concealed carry, they do a NICS check, a background check through FBI, which is the same check they would do to get you an FFL. I guess one way to look at it is, if you can buy a firearm and you can get a concealed carry, there's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to get a federal firearms license.
Okay. Couple questions on silencers here. Frank says, if I have a Type 7 and I buy a silencer, do I need to pay a tax stamp on it? And then he asks kind of the same thing, if they want to sell one, do I pay transfer fees? I think a lot of them have questions on tax stamps, silencers, and the different FFLs and that type of thing.
Right. So you always have to pay that tax if you don't have the SOT or the Class 3 or Class 2. So if you just have a basic FFL, then unfortunately this process is the same for you to buy a silencer as it is for, John Doe off the street. I mean, that's kind of an oversimplification, but there's a way as an FFL you can buy a silencer, and we can do the paperwork to sell you a silencer, but it's still the $200, and then it goes into your FFL inventory. And I find most people would either rather have it in their own name or in a trust that we would create for them instead of in their FFL. I've had guys who bought silencers from me when they had only an FFL, and they didn't put it in their inventory correctly. You're supposed to enter it into your inventory just like any other firearm, and they get inspected, and then ATF calls me and says, hey, they can't find this. Can you send us tracking information and confirm that you sent them the silencer that they bought? Because I don't think the dealers realize that it's just like any other firearm. If I sell it to you as an FFL dealer, you're not licensed to sell silencers. So the assumption is it's for your inventory on your own books, and it sits in your inventory just like any other firearm would.
Okay, sounds good. A couple people have asked if you could expand on ITAR. Do you have to register with ITAR if you have an 07? A couple people asked if that was a requirement or if that's something that you don't have to do. So we'll start there.
So just remember that the ATF is the one that issues the FFL, and it's the Department of State that issues and determines the ITAR. ITAR is difficult because, like I said before, the feds really define it very vaguely who needs to register with ITAR. So then it becomes up to the federal bureaucrats whether they want you to register or not. The hard part too is if you sit in front of an ATF person when you're registering for an 07, most of them will try to scare you and tell you that you have to register for ITAR. What I'll tell you though is when you do apply for an 07, in most cases, the ATF will send a letter to the Department of State and tell them you applied. Just realize that there's no enforcement as of now. There's no like enforcement group at the Department of State that goes around and tries to catch people. I mean, there's an Excel spreadsheet online as part of the Freedom of Information Act where I can download every, FFL in the country, and I can sort that Excel spreadsheet by 07s. And I can tell you exactly how many 07s there are in each zip code in the entire country. So if every human being that has access to the internet has that, obviously, the Department of State could enforce that if they wanted to, but they don't really have an enforcement arm. But if you do apply for an 07, the ATF does send them a letter and tell them you applied. They have a form letter they send you. I told you before when they sent it to me, I just told them that I don't export and that I don't manufacture per se. Like I might assemble, but I don't actually machine anything. And that sort of cooled their heels. There's a lot of exceptions in ITAR. We cover those in our guide. There's some ways around it. I've got some letters where I got a variance where I didn't have to apply in a previous life. So when I first got my first 07 years ago. So there's some workarounds, but I mean, it's a hard thing. I mean, you sit in front of ATF, you're nervous. This is your first time meeting with a federal agency. You're thinking, wow, they're telling me I have to register. Just remember that they're not, they're ATF, and that other part is registered by the Department of State. Probably the best answer is to call the Department of State and tell them exactly what you plan to do with your 07, and they'll tell you over the phone whether you need to apply or not. And in our guides, we have the phone number, the link, all the information where you can just call them up and say, hey, here's what I plan to do. Do I need to register? Yes or no? And they'll give you an answer over the phone, and sometimes they'll follow up and put it in an email if you want, so it's in writing. That's really the best approach. It's not fair to, ask a friend or buddy or colleague or even me as a speaker if my particular scenario is going to require me to register or not, because it's a federal agency, and who knows, they might have a certain way they look at it differently. But just realize that if you're not actually manufacturing, like actually machining, typically you don't have to register at all if you're just assembling. I know that kind of flies in the face. Some people say that putting threads on the end of the barrel is enhancing the ability of the firearm and that would require registering. So, I mean, it's a slippery slope. But again, I think if you have an idea what you want to do and talk to, the folks at the Department of State directly based on some of the numbers we can provide you, they'll give you a better sense. But you could also start out with an 07 and do nothing but deal. You could say, hey, I got an 07 because I like the flexibility that one day I might want to make something. So I'm currently using my 07 as a dealer, and the only thing we're doing is using it as a dealer function, and we have for the last 3 or 4 years. So there would be no need for us to ever register with you guys because we're not doing anything but acting as a dealer. So that's one scenario that a lot of people start out with.
Right. Okay, great. Can you talk about what would be needed to go into full autos? A lot of people are kind of asking about full autos and that type of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always a tough one. If you called up the ATF and you called up, and asked them their opinion, they would say that that the only reason a dealer should need a machine gun is if they're demoing it to sell it to a government agency. So I think that's important to keep in the back of your mind. You don't want to sit down with an ATF agent and say, I'm really excited about getting this license because then I can make machine guns for myself and go out in the backyard and play. It just, I mean, common sense tells you not to say that, even though you might be thinking that. But once you have an 07 and then you get the manufacturer's license, you can make machine guns and you just register them with ATF and they put them in the registry and it's a machine gun. And it's in your inventory and it's yours, your business's. Your employees can use it, believe it or not. And in a lot of states, even if it's illegal for residents to own them, dealers can have them because the assumption is you might be selling them to government agencies. Just be careful. I mean, we really lock ours down. I mean, I think that you kind of have a responsibility as a dealer too to watch this kind of stuff. You don't want that to get, stolen and out in the open market with the machine guns. But so I told you the scenario where you have an '07 and you have an SOT, you can make them. I think when I first started, I had my first '07 and my SOT. I think I made 10 full auto lowers, and I love them. I put 9mm on the top. I put, 22s on top. I put 300 blackouts on top. I put short barrel rifles. I've got all these lowers that are all full auto, and I have just tons, stacks of stuff I put on top of it. And it is a lot of fun. Anytime we do demos for our silencers, we say, well, if you buy a silencer today, you get to use this fancy machine gun, and you get to pick which upper you want to put on there. So it is a lot of fun, and it is a great perk. So say, for instance, you can't make stuff yourself. You're not mechanically inclined, or you don't feel comfortable, drilling out and putting autos here and there. As if you become a Class 3 dealer, so again, you have a type 01 FFL, and then you upgrade that with an SOT, and then the slang is you're a Class 3 dealer. So with that, you can buy machine guns. You can buy dealer samples is what they call them. So in 1986, there was this thing called the Hughes Act, where basically Congress drew a line in the sand and they said you can't make any more machine guns after May 20th, 1986. So anything made after that date is not transferable. So if I make a machine gun, I can only sell it to another dealer or to a government agency or turn it over to the ATF or destroy it. But anything that was made prior to that date in '86 is transferable. So there's about 275,000 machine guns in the market, and that number doesn't go up. If anything, it goes down. And those trade at high premiums. Average machine gun is going to cost you 10 to 20,000 or more. I've seen them, 100,000 plus. If it's truly transferable, if it was registered and it was made in May of 1986, May 20th, 1986 or earlier. But the dealer samples is probably what most people are asking about. So probably my favorite, let me think, I've got a saw on order, an FN saw. So I can't say that's my favorite, which one's my favorite yet, because I haven't gotten that one in yet. But the manufacturers typically will sell you a machine gun direct. So Chris Vectors, I recently got a 9mm Chris Vector full auto. I have a 45 full auto. I have a Uzi full auto. All these full autos you can order directly from the manufacturer, but here's the kicker. You have to get a law enforcement, not necessarily local, but you have to get a law enforcement agency to say they're interested in you doing a demo of that. So again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. The ATF doesn't want you stockpiling machine guns for your own personal use or, for whatever reason. It all has to be driven to the fact that at some point you're going to try to sell them. So you have to find a law enforcement agency. They don't even have to be in your same state or county or city that wants to have a demonstration done of that machine gun, and you have to get them to write that letter on their letterhead, and it has to be written a certain way, and you have to submit that with the request to buy it from the manufacturer before the manufacturer can legally transfer it to you. It takes some persistence. I mean, I know I get a lot of emails, people kind of whining like, I can't find anyone to write me a letter. Be persistent. If you go to your local sheriff and say, hey, how would you and your staff like to shoot my M16 with my ammo for several hours? The answer is always, man, I'm totally interested in that, Brandon. Well, I can't believe you would even allow us to do that. Well, there's one catch here. I got to get you to write me a letter saying that you would have an interest in buying it. And they're like, okay, you write the letter, we'll sign it. So we probably have, 20 or 30 dealer demos. I mean, they hold their value well. I think I paid less than $1,000 for a full auto Uzi. I've even got a MP5 SBR in a briefcase. It's kind of like the James Bond. The trigger's in the handle, and it is cool. But that is definitely a perk to having, an FFL, and if nothing else, to get the Class 3 for a little while just to play with, some of the machine guns, and it's sort of a whole different world. You'll end up meeting a whole lot of people that you didn't even know had them, or those kind of come out of the woodwork when they find out that that's sort of an expertise or an interest you have. Cool. But again, just take it seriously. I mean, I don't want to, sound like the school principal or the dad, but just, there is a certain level of scrutiny if you have those, so you want to make sure everything's on the up and up. Also, you kind of have a responsibility as a dealer to protect your local area and the rest of the country to keep those things locked up tight, because if they get out on the streets, it's definitely an issue. And just realize at the end of the day, I told you I made a lot of lowers. I sold a lot of those lowers to law enforcement agencies as well, just so that I did have a paper trail that showed I had sold some Class 3 machine guns to law enforcement agencies, so if I ever get questioned. But no, let's go back to my favorite one. So my favorite one, thinking through this, is probably a Glock 18. So that's obviously the Glock 17 and a 9 millimeter, but it's in the full auto conversion. I had the Nebraska Highway Patrol sold it to me. I think it was like $4,000, but there's hardly any out there. There's probably 100 that are transferable to dealers, even available, and those are super fun.
I know we're running out of time here. I'm gonna give you a couple little things. A couple people have asked about how to set up a business from an FFL perspective in regards to, is it easier or better, I guess, to set up as a sole proprietor or a DBA and then switch to an LLC, or should you set up an LLC first and then, you know what I mean, before you make that application?
Yeah.
Is it a smarter move to do that? And then I have one last question that I definitely want to get to, so we'll try to breeze through some of those. But
yeah, okay, so yeah, good question. And I mean, of course, it sounds like I'm being self-centered to say, look at my guides, but I do have a whole chapter on this, and I do think that people should read through that, because there are obviously some benefits to having an LLC to protect you. There's also benefits to having an LLC. It brings you more credibility. If you walk up to the bank and you're opening up a business account, or you're calling a wholesaler and you say, I want you to sell guns to me even though I'm new and you've never heard of me and I just got my license, you bring so much more credibility to the table when you have an LLC. I'm not saying that it won't work as a sole proprietor, but just realize that if you start as a sole proprietor and then you want to change your license to be owned by your LLC, you got to reapply. So that's why sometimes in life it is good to kind of step back and think through. I mean, that's why I was saying our guide walks through all the different types so you can think through, gosh, which one's the best type for me? Then it walks through, should I do this as an individual or should I spend a little extra and do it as a business? So then you kind of have the full picture of what's out there in front of you, so you can make a decision thinking about, potential of future instead of just like right now.
okay, great.
And I think there's also some benefits to thinking about how you label your LLC, because if anyone knows me, they've read my website, that I got fired from an employer when they heard I was doing this. And the name of my LLC is Maddox Enterprises. So, of course, Maddox Enterprises screams Brandon Maddox owns this really loud.
Right.
And that didn't help me when my employer called and said, tell us a little bit about Maddox Enterprises. It's hard to go, well, I've never heard of
that. Right. Okay, cool. So I love this question. Mark asks, Brandon, what are some of the key mistakes you may have encountered in starting the firearms business? He's kind of looking for like top 2 or 3 recommendations that you would advise to those kind of looking to enter the industry. And he also, I think, he says, secondly, what are some of the shortfalls you see in individuals applying for their FFL that they can avoid? So those 2 kind of things, they walk hand in hand.
That's actually, that's a good question. I like that question. Good? So, yeah, I really like that question. Okay, so for me, it's too many people in life are focused on all the obstacles. I mean, like I said, the obstacle for me was I thought I wanted to do long-range rifles because I like to prairie dog hunt. So I thought, wow, I can buy, the Cooper rifle that's costing me $1,800. I'm going to be able to get it for half off, and I'll be able to sell them, and this will be a great world, and, this will all be fun. It'll enhance my hobby and wah, wah, wah. So if I had been so focused on that, when that didn't work out, then I probably would have let my FFL expire and never even move forward. So I think that the biggest mistake I see is most people see one obstacle and they fall apart. Like one day I got a call from the city and they said, we've pulled your home-based business permit because we don't want you to have an FFL at your house. So it'd been easy for me to say, well, dag, that sucks. But no, I was like, who called them? I'm going to fix that person, and then I'm going to get this thing fixed, and I'm going to, so the goal is anytime you see an obstacle, just tell yourself that that's really an opportunity, because it's going to put you in a different direction that's going to help you get to where you want to be. Because I feel like where I'm at now is where, gosh, it's like the best place for me. But, 10 years, 15 years ago, I was a sales manager in a pharmaceutical company making great money, having great benefits that I would have never left if I hadn't gotten fired. And then it basically pushed me more into this industry right before Obama got in, so things just kept going up and I kind of rode it up. So for me, I mean, my life story is like completely changed, different than what I would have planned, but if I had looked at all the obstacles, then I probably would have folded. But by kind of just hanging in there and every time you see an obstacle, go, all right, how do I overcome this? Because at the end of the day, what you're going to find is most motivational speakers will tell you that if you have momentum, like if you're moving forward, that then you can readjust and go in the right direction. But if you're sitting on the couch going, all right, you know, this is horrible, I'm not ever going to be able to get out of this, then things never will go well. So anytime you see an obstacle, just figure out a way to blow through it, because then the next opportunity is right around the corner. So the biggest shortcomings for me, honestly, like, I don't know if it's my paranoid personality, but as soon as I got my FFL, I was convinced that like the FBI is watching me from like satellites and my phone's tapped and everyone that comes in is a plant trying to see if I'm doing it right, and neighbors are looking at me, they hear I'm selling guns. I mean, I don't know what it was, but I was like paranoid. Like, I think that kept me from being as effective as I could. So what that forced me to do was it forced me to learn more. So now I feel like I'm a subject matter expert. Like, next month we have the head guy at ATF is coming to our location. He goes to one site every year, and he's coming here because I've met him at a lot of compliance conventions. I've met him at SHOT Show. I mean, I see him and he knows I'm proactive. I ask questions. I give them pushback. If I don't agree with them, I write them letters and tell them, or I have my attorneys write letters. If I want them to change processes that I think are legitimate for me and my colleagues, I send them a letter and say, here's what we should be doing. So I would say just be confident that you're not being watched. I mean, they're too busy chasing the criminals who are actually breaking the law. I feel like I was almost scared, and I do sense that from a lot of people. And honestly, I think that's one of the huge benefits and one of the reasons why FFL 123 has done so well, because as Americans, we fear our government. I mean, the whole idea of giving them your fingerprints and meeting with them to get permission to sell firearms, it gets a lot of people shaken up, me included. But I think that if you embrace that and say, you know what, once I get into this, I'm going to get it figured out, and I'm going to learn everything I can about it, and I'm going to be confident, and I'm not going to worry about the government trying to do whatever, I think that'll help you. Because I see a lot of people think that way. I can just tell by the tone of the emails to me, people are scared they're going to do something wrong. That's why I say just, you know, that was another reason why we created FFL123.com, is people feel like they're going to do something wrong. Well, you know, we've sort of beat the process out because we've been through it so many times, and we live this world every day. So we know exactly, you know, how to handle a particular situation to give you confidence so that you can move through it and not feel like you hit an obstacle, or feel like you're being watched, or feel like you did something wrong and someone's going to slap your hand.
Awesome. Okay, so I have one final, this isn't even a question. This is just a remark. Hold on, let me scroll through and find it. 808. Okay. This will be a nice little segue into, a lot of people are asking some background information, a little bit more on how they get stuff from FFL 123 and kind of where your locations are for Dakota Silencer and all that good stuff. But before we do that, to wrap up, I do want to say, I wanted to read this off to you. Peter says, I came on here to personally thank Brandon. I became a member of your site in January, and through your teachings and info, I got prepared and had my ATF interview 2 weeks ago, and I got approved for a home-based FFL. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to any way to pay it forward. Isn't that cool?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So if you could kind of wrap it up for us and walk anybody who's interested through how they could get to your guide section. We had a couple people ask where the discussion boards would be, and I kind of directed them to the site, but if you want to expand on that. And then we did have one person ask if you were located, if you had any locations in Florida and that type of thing. So
yeah, good question. So basically, if you know, the guides aren't that expensive. I mean, they start at like $39.95. And, you know, I guess I feel fortunate that, you know, we've been doing it since 2005. So last I checked, we had like 75, 80,000 people who've, you know, purchased the guides at one time or another. Now, there's only 70,000 FFLs in the country, so I can't claim to have helped all of them because I have more members than there are FFLs. But, you know, we definitely have reached out to a lot of, you know, people, made friends. And honestly, that's what's cool about me working at gun shows and going to the NRA or going to SHOT Show. I meet, you know, hundreds of people that I kind of helped get into the industry. But yeah, if you just go to ffl123.com, you might have to turn your volume off because there's like a video on there of me. But any of the guides there you can purchase. Once you're a member, you get access to like a members area. Your email address will be your username, and the system will give you a password. You can log in, and there's like a section for the members forums. And I do feel like there's a wealth of information. I hear a lot of my friends say that when they search that members area, they learn so much. And I realize that I end up answering a lot of the questions in the members area, and that maybe we don't have as many perspectives, but it is all categorized and it's in there from a historical perspective. So there's years worth of kind of information and experiences in there. So, but yeah, and feel free to contact me through the page too. I mean, I used to say I answer 110% of all emails, but lately I get like weird emails like, can I carry this certain kind of pistol in New York City if I have an FFL? Or just, I get some kind of
very
weird,
detailed, right?
yeah, really weird stuff that I'm like, no matter how I answer this, it's not going to be right. So sometimes I'll just send them my, free report or something like that. But if anything, I'll tell you, I am very responsive on emails. So I, check email all day long. I run all my other businesses in front of the computer. So if you have questions or they come up or, just post questions in the members area and I can respond to them. But again, I mean, our goal is, my main business is Dakota Silencer, which, we love, but I also like the fact of kind of having the side business of FFL123.com to help other people get into the industry. I could probably give you a list of like 10 huge people that are in the industry that you'd be like, wow, I can't believe you helped them get into it. I mean, I was on the Sons of Guns. I helped them get their FFL at the people who put that show on. So I've met a lot of, cool people. But
Neat.
yeah, and as far as locations in Florida, I moved here from Florida, so I guess I should get a location in Florida. But part of our business model with Dakota Silencer is working on a lot of trade shows and gun shows. So just geographically, we've only kind of focused on, states that touch South Dakota. And then we try to work as many of the gun shows and sportsman shows in those states. And we just find that if someone can meet someone live face to face, and you can walk them through how to buy a silencer, and that person feels confident with your answer and they like the way your product looks, you have a higher probability of selling it to them, especially if you can do the paperwork right there at the show than just putting up a website and saying, come visit me. So,
sure.
I mean, we have both. I mean, obviously, I worked a sportsman show in Minneapolis for the last 5 days, and I see people coming to the website and buying after that who didn't buy there. But, so there's always compliments it.
Of course. Yeah. Jonathan wants to know if you're going to be in Tulsa this weekend for the Wanamaker Gun Show.
Yeah, no, I wish. I keep saying I want to go. I got a gun show in Minot, so usually Minot up near Canada, North Dakota. So yeah, no, I wish. Every year I keep saying I want to go to Tulsa. A lot of the dealers that I work with go to Tulsa, but as I was telling Jennifer before we started, I spend the first 4 months of the year going to every gun show in the states that touch here. I usually have 3 crews every weekend, so it's myself and then I got 2 other crews, and we go to typically 3 gun shows a weekend and go sort of spread the good word.
Of course. Very nice. Well, I think that's all the time we have for tonight. Now, there were quite a few questions that we didn't get. Some of the more specific stuff I wasn't able to get to. I apologize to those people. We'll see if we can't sift through some of them, maybe offline. Maybe Brandon would be so good as to come back and join us again in a couple months.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
We'd love to do this again. Thank you, everybody, for being here. You guys, I really, really appreciate it. This was a great and very active group, and we love that. So thank you for being here tonight. Brandon, if they want more information, go ahead and tell them one more time where to go if they need any more information from you.
Yeah, so we're just FFL123.com. Don't ask me how I came up with that, but I trademarked it and patented it and everything else. So it's, I mean, it just, it sounds like it's, easy as 123. So yeah, just FFL123. Or you could probably Google me and find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or just contact me through the website, or my email address is just brandon@FFL123.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Same thing with SDI. If you need anything from us, my personal email address is jennifer@sdi.edu. If you want more information on the programs and courses we have, that's admissions@sdi.edu, or check out the website sdi.edu. Easy. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it. We do this every month, so if this is something that you guys like, we have different guests on every month, cover all sorts of topics. If you want to get on our newsletter list for information on that, you can do that at the bottom of the homepage of the website, or you can keep an eye out on the Facebook page. We always kind of give you at least a week heads up on who our next guest is going to be. So we love doing these things. They're a lot of fun, and we really appreciate everybody in attendance tonight. Yep, SDI, Sierra Delta India.edu, Corbin. And we will be at NRA. Yes, Jonathan, we will, if that's the one you're talking about, we're going to be at NRA at the end of next month. So if anybody is there, keep an eye out for information there. All right. Thank you, everybody. And again, thank you so much, Brandon. I really appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everybody keep an eye out for the recording link, which will be available probably tomorrow on the YouTube account, and I will post it to Facebook as well, and we'll get it to Brandon too. So if anybody is coming from an FFL 123, like a member section, something like that, and you forget who we are, go to Brandon. He'll have that information too. So thanks very much, guys, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks.